Today on Revived by Books, 101 Weapons of Spiritual Warfare. The Prayer of Jehu. Deliverance from Evil Foundation. Prayer Passport to Crush Oppression. And Smite the Enemy and He Will Flee.
Welcome back from the break. So the book that we will be looking at first is this book that I'm holding, Prayer Passport to Crush Oppression, written by our overseer, Dr. Olukoya. This book is a manual of sorts and addresses over 100 different topics that apply to various areas of our life. The design of this book is such that you will always need to use it, and it's a book that every Christian should have in their library. The intent of this book when it was written was to be used if there's a specific issue or a specific scenario in a person's life. The book is to be used, have a look in the book, pick the subject that best applies to the current situation that you're going through, pray through the prayers, and by the grace of God, there'll definitely be deliverance in that part of your life. What made you become a youth pastor?
What made me become a youth pastor? For me, it was God. I will anchor everything around divine call.
Okay.
As if God literally just picked me and hijacked me at a very young age. And since that period time of my life, it's been a very wonderful experience because He has led me all the way to where I am today.
Okay.
And I have no regret being a youth pastor. Yeah.
Hijack is an interesting word. Why do you use that word specifically to describe what you do?
Yeah, because as a young man, I had plans. I had so many things that on my own I want to be. But God literally stepped in, and that's why I use the word hijacked, and took me out of my own set plans and brought me inside His will. Okay. It was difficult for me, but I owe it to God and to Dr. Dike Olukoya, who gave me that listening here at a very young age of my life when I needed mentoring. And He was there for me, and also to my parents that allowed me to work for God.
Would you say that there's a difference between being a youth pastor and just being a pastor?
Yeah, definitely a lot of difference.
Okay.
Because when you work with youths, you have to be a step ahead of them. And for everybody, we have to place value on the youths in our society. If you build the youth, you build your nation. And if you don't build your youth, you will destroy your nation.
Okay.
And so that means in the plan of God, even in our world, youth occupy a very strategic position. So because they are the leaders of tomorrow. So for me, if you are looking at youth, you have to be able to think like them, reason like them, and also be able to help them, give them proper mentoring into the future. So being a youth pastor has a lot of spiritual and physical presence that you have to have so that you can achieve something great with them.
The next book by our beloved father is titled Smite the Enemy and He Will Flee. This book is an interesting book. As we've said earlier, all the books on the show today are addressing deliverance, but they're all addressing deliverance from different aspects. This book specifically talks about dust. It's talking about how we all have our origins from dust, referring to Genesis, where God created man from the dust and formed him from the dust of the earth and breathed the breath of life into his nostrils. So with this book, what Dr. Olukoya is exploring is the fact that in Genesis, after Adam and Eve were found to have sinned, God placed a curse and said that dust would be the food of the serpent, and dust being human beings, that has created a warfare from the beginning of time, which is still ongoing till today. So smite the enemy and he will flee just talks about taking an offensive stance in warfare and in prayer, and being offensive with the enemy rather than defensive. Again, this is a very, very useful book and equips you with the tools and resources that you will need to engage effective warfare against the enemy.
So, Pastor Gabriel, you made the point originally about fashion and how it affects the young people. What advice would you give to a young person that's conscientious of the way they dress? They still want to impress their friends, they still want to look fashionable, but also they want to do it in a modest way. What one piece of advice would you give them?
Well, I believe that the church itself plays a crucial role in this. We've been very relaxed in terms of we propagating the image that we want our youth and of Christian background to display out there. If you look, for instance, the other people who are of the Islamic faith, there is a prescribed code of dressing that they adhere to. And the ones that are practicing their faith, of course, you can tell right away. You don't have to call them, say what you worship or who you know. But we as Christians, there seems to be a wishy-washy, there seems to be a marriage between the worldly way and the Christian way. It's kind of entangled. So the youth are confused. They don't know, well, which way should I go? Because they don't have a role model in sense of how they should present themselves to the public. And I think, I'm not blaming the church, but the church is lacking in educating the youth on this matter.
So rather than a single piece of advice, it's kind of more of an educational piece that we need to give to the church to make sure, as the church rather, to make sure that our youths are much more knowledgeable about the way they dress. That's a fantastic point. Thank you.
Every every youth pastor has a responsibility to have an open door system where you can let your youth trust you. Everyone responds, even a madman will respond positively to love. If you show a young person love, they would come to you to speak to you about it. And then again, for any young person who has a struggle out there, I would say to you, you need to keep it open. You need to throw it open, because most times sin thrives in secrecy.
Yes.
So once you open it up and then you look for someone who can guide you, most times when you open it up, you realize that half of the problem is solved, and then you get someone who's your accountability partner, who watches out for you, who guides you through that phase, and then by the grace of God, everything will be sorted.
So once again, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Christian Realities. We've been discussing temptation, specifically how it affects the youth, and we hope that some of the advice that you received here will be useful to you, either as a young person yourself or as a youth pastor. Until next time, goodbye and God bless.
Once again, it's your one and only Franklin Edwards.
Bring it out.
Love Vault Records.
Bring it out.
Let's go. TP1.
Papa got it too much. The way you bless me, I never see such. I cannot deny this. The love you shower on me is so much. Can someone explain this? You love me, you're there for me even before I exist. So I can't resist all the list you love.